All right, so in case you were not here on the 25th, here's the agenda and the lecture. So I gave you time to prep your lecture notes. And again, we are talking about the end of World War I. So how do we get there? We've looked at a lot of battles in class already, but we have to look at some of the other factors as well. So one of the big factors that's going to lead to the end of World War I is the British blockade of Germany. So Great Britain did have the strongest navy in the world at this time, and they used it to blockade Germany. So they wouldn't let them get supplies from other places through the North Sea. By 1915, so just a year into the war, German imports had dropped more than 50%. So what that's going to mean is that both the military and the German population are going to start starving. So people are going to get upset about this and maybe become anti-war, right? Because when it's actually affecting you, that's when you're going to see results. So because of these blockades, over 400,000 German civilians are going to die from the blockade. And again, this brings up kind of what we talked about already, the idea of total war. So total war being that it's not just your country's military that's at war, it is your entire population is now at war. So it's like countries against each other, not just the country's militaries. Everyone has to do their part. And in this case, even the civilians are going to suffer. We also see this with battles that take the lives of thousands of citizens, right? That's the idea of total war. Even the civilians are at war. So what else is going to change? A big change is going to be the United States entering. So as we did cover last class, we went over the Lusitania and the Zimmermann telegram that is going to lead the US into World War I in 1917. And the US is going to send about 4 million troops to Europe. That's going to be a big boost for the Allies who've been fighting for 4 years, right? Now, all of a sudden, you get this rush of millions of soldiers who are not exhausted, who are not tired of trench warfare, who are not completely worn out. So that's going to give the Allies a really big boost. Another key factor that is going to factor into this is going to be the Russian Revolution and Russia withdrawing from the war, right? So Russia, again, was on the Allies, and it was important for them important for the Allies because it made it a two-front war. We would see Germany had to fight on the Russian border, the Eastern Front again, and then the Western border, the border with France, basically, the Western Front. However, during this war, Russia was facing very heavy losses and starvation, similar to Germany, which is going to kind of lead to riots in Russia. So their czar, because they were still a monarchy at that time, their czar, like their emperor or their king, is going to step down in March of 1917 and is going to be replaced by a provisional government that thinks they're going to keep ruling, right? However, this is when we are going to see a communist revolution led by Vladimir Lenin. And this revolution is going to be successful, and they will take power in November of 1917. So at this point, the communists are in control in Russia. And one of the first things they do, they see all the terrible things that the war is bringing on. And so Russia is going to sign a truce with Germany in March of 1918, effectively ending the war in Russia and, more importantly, ending the war on the Eastern Front. So now Germany, because they had to have their military split, they can now send all of their military to the Western Front. So to Germany, or to France and Belgium, right? And so they are going to be very successful. And initially, when they get all those new soldiers, they're going to really push the line back. They're pushing towards Paris, get within 40 miles of Paris. And if Paris falls, good chance the rest of France is going to fall, right? So that's what they called the Spring Offensive, again, because it happens right after Russia drops out, March of 1918. However, then the Allies are going to have their own 100 days offensive. So with the arrival of the American soldiers, again, they were bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and moving through, not used to this terrible warfare, they are going to push far back against the Germans. This is actually going to lead to a lot of American deaths at the beginning, because they were not used to this type of warfare like the other countries had been. And so they kind of do things that led to a lot of deaths, things that both countries were doing at the beginning of the war, just sending all those troops over. The Allies are also going to have improved technology. They're going to improve their tanks. That's going to help them push back the German line. And there's going to be so much that's going to spread the German lines too thin. And the soldiers are going to begin to mutiny against their own commanders. So Kaiser Wilhelm, the leader of Germany, is going to step down on November 9th of 1918. And then officially there's an armistice, so a stop to fighting on November 11th. So again, that is what we recognize as Veterans Day. That is what it is commemorating. So the fighting is officially going to end on November 11th. So then I did have you go through some of the World War I statistics just to kind of see all of the military deaths and wounded. We're going to see Russia with almost 2 million deaths, British forces with 1 million, France with 1.5 million, Germany with 2 million. Overall, the Allies are going to lose more people to have more military deaths, and the Central Powers will have about 4 million deaths. But the big thing that I do want to point out here is all of the civilian deaths. It is almost 7 million, so pretty close to the same amount of military deaths. Again, those are just innocent, for the most part, civilians, not involved in the fighting. So that it does bring out that idea of total war. These are numbers we haven't really seen before, right? The other important statistic I want to point out is the Americans only losing, I mean, it sounds terrible to say this, only losing 116,000. That's still 116,000 people that were killed to this war. But when you compare it to the other nations, the US was not as invested. That's kind of going to factor into the negotiation talks at the end. The United States will have all these idealized ideas of things to do at the end of the war, and the other countries aren't going to listen to them as much. They didn't have as much invested. And lastly, that does bring us to the end of the war. Some notes. Again, fighting is going to end on November 11th of 1918. And then peace talks are going to take place, known as the Paris Peace Conference. Those are going to begin in January of 1919. So 32 countries overall are going to send delegates to these peace talks. And officially, the war is going to end with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, which we are going to be talking about a lot more tomorrow or the next class. So this is the end of the fighting, and this is really going to signal the end of the war. All right, so again, make sure you have all those active listening notes. Write your summary and turn them in to be graded. If you did miss class like today, turn it in next class. And then you do have an exit ticket. So as always, this is a link you can click on, and then you can use your phone for a QR code. All right, and I will see you next class.